The world is shifting. Inspiration is everywhere. We learn about the best in ourselves from each other. I'm Will McPherson, and you've hit rock bottom. Building your health and happiness from the ground on up. Today's podcast is on interesting ways to look at life's risks. My expert guest is Brian Murphy. A rare breed, he's a legal loss consultant for QBE North America. Best way to follow or connect with Brian is on LinkedIn. Brian, you've been in the insurance industry forever. Right? You look at your customers' unique risks. So if you could, so folks are listening saying, well, okay, this guy has got really a very specific, you've been doing it for decades, a way of looking at risks, right? And everybody's got risks, whether you're at home, got a business, and, what are some of the most unique risks you've looked at? And, so people can think about that. Oh, I never thought about that.
Oh, wow. You sound like you've followed me around for a while.
That I have.
In terms of my career.
Course. Yes. I put a different coat of paint on. Yeah, go ahead.
Well, to summarize what I do, it is, based in the insurance industry, of course. It's risk management or loss control is the function. And I basically do three things. One is for whatever insurance company I'm working for at the time, and I've worked for a few. One of the primary functions is this is commercial insurance, right? So businesses, someone will buy insurance for their business because everyone needs insurance. And then the people or the function that decides whether or not this particular insurance company is going to take them on. Do they fit what they are insuring? Is it fit their mold? And how much should they charge for a given business or whatever they're doing? And what types of insurance are they going to be providing? Workers' compensation or property insurance for their building and their contents or their fleet of trucks, or if they're making a product, the product liability that goes with building a widget or a hot dog or whatever, and liability of their premises, grandma slips and falls in the parking lot, that sort of thing, and all those different types of coverages, we call them. So my number one job overall is to go out there on, say, a new piece of business that they've just written, based on the agent, the brokers told them, yeah, this is good. It'll be good for this particular program. Put them in. Yeah. Usually we'll follow up we'll go out there right before the insurance is written on like a prospective basis, or we'll go out right after it's written, because usually they have an insurance company typically has 60 or 90 days to get off something. If there's some sort of material misrepresentation, like, oh, you said you were a hot dog stand, but you're a nuclear power plant. Okay. That sort of thing. So we'll go out there. I'll go out there and
you can combine both. I mean, it'll steam the hot dogs. Great. Green steamed hot dogs are fantastic.
Yeah. And you know what? They'll taste delicious for 50 million years.
Years. That's right.
But you go out there and you meet with management, because as management goes, a whole business goes. Everything in a business is driven by management and ownership, right? So you go out in there and you find out what they do, see what kind of processes they have in place from a business standpoint, whatever it is they're doing. How is management involved? Are they controlling? Do they know what their hazards and exposures are for a given type of operation or line of coverage and things like that? What are they doing to address them? Is it kind of expected that, okay, well, they're this type of business and this type of business usually does this to control this type of hazard? And you kind of get a sense of what's going on. And then part of that is later on, I'll do kind of an analysis and I'll report back to the underwriter or whatnot and say, okay, this is who you have.
Not the Underhills, but the underwriter.
The Underhills. That's later, that's afterwards. And let them know, like, okay, this is a risk or an insured, if we already insure them, that, they look good from a risk control standpoint or a loss control standpoint. Probably not. They're probably going to have an expected level of losses. And, here's what I would recommend that they might do to decrease their losses. I'll also typically share that with the insured or client or whatever you want to call it. Like, hey, you really should, you might want to reorganize a management oversight of X, Y, and Z on your production line, or you may want to install a special fire protection system, or you may want to have special controls for your drivers, check their backgrounds more, so on and so forth.
That's what I was thinking. And when you're dealing with a fleet of trucks, right, that kind of hits us all. It's I'm rooting for the day when AI will take over trucks, right? There are some fantastic truck drivers out there. I don't know about the collective, but that sounds like something to take a look at, right? Is my cousin works for Nicor Gas, and he manages a fleet of trucks for him. And the first thing he tells them is no texting while driving.
Yeah,
and he said it's when you text, you actually go about 200 yards down the road without looking at it. So
it's surpassed. That's a good point. Putting on the safety cap right now.
You got to tell people just the basics of everything.
It's true. You actually hit the nail on the head. From an auto fleet, that's a group of any vehicles that a company might own. If you were to look at their loss runs, we call them, or their claims history or whatnot, the driver of vehicle collisions and then ergo acts, injuries caused by those is distracted driving. And we all know what that's causing that. That's people on their phones texting. You can see it as we drive along too. That is a big initiative with every insurance carrier and safety organizations is to try to address that. Now that could be 12 podcasts right there.
It could be,
how that can be addressed, but we do focus a lot on that. And that is also the leading cause of death on the roads right now, more than impaired driving, drunken driving, whatnot. It's distracted driving.
That's interesting. So strangest thing you've ever had to talk about, people worrying about a loss, for a business. What's the strangest thing?
Well, since you look at what are called all lines of coverage, right? There's always we call war stories, right? We call it loss control. There's a term called loss control poker. If you're a loss controller, or a risk manager, or whatever, you kind of know.
Write that down, folks.
It's basically, all right, you got that story. Well, I'm gonna see that story and up you this story, right? So, gosh, weirdest things. I mean, I've been in lots of different situations over the years. Weirdest claims type things. Usually they always involve human beings. It's usually not, the building burned down. Oh, okay, the building burned down. What more is there to say about that? Well, sometimes there's a little bit more, but usually in the workers' compensation area, that's where you get some really interesting things. And typically they involve, unfortunately, exaggerated or fraudulent claims, shall we say. I can think of one instance where I was working for one company, year X, call it, and it was a contractor. They did drywall, and I just went down to talk to them about some of their losses and, kind of do a consultation visit, as we call that, helping the insured control some of their losses. And we looked at their claims history and, this guy, we said, what about this guy? It looks like he's had this back injury. It's this amount of money. What's going on with this?
How long did he have the back injury for?
Oh, well, that's always the interesting part, right? Is it, and this gets into another about 12 podcast episode about workers' comp fraud and things of that nature. But the interesting thing about this was, he had the back injury. It was what they call an open claim. So it was still being litigated. And typically it wasn't, you just don't pay the claim, you medical pay, blah, 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 they come back. When it gets a little funky, shall we say, there's litigation involved. Usually they're looking for compensation, pain and suffering, things of that nature. Okay, that's part of the game. You understand that. But what made this and this kind of what kicked this off into be what I consider kind of a funny or interesting story anyway is he had a really unique name, which of course I cannot say.
No, you can't. Yeah.
But suffice to say, it was, and the owner, of course, I know this guy. He's, blah, blah, blah. He's been doing this for 45 years and I'm paying for his back essentially. And he also plays softball. And I think he hurt his back playing softball the weekend before. Take a couple of Tylenols, hobble in, and then all of a sudden your back gets hurt on work. So that way his private medical insurance didn't have to pay for it, but his workers' comp could pay for it. Plus he also gets lost time, paid for salary. He gets paid 60% of his salary when he's off work, that sort of thing. Understand that too. You get to really be empathetic with people, both sides of the story when you do this job long enough. See what motivates people. So we do our thing. I give them some ideas, go on. A couple of years later, I'm working for a new insurance company. You can probably see where that punchline is going with this one, right? So I go down to another drywall contractor in the same general geographic area, and I'm looking at the loss runs, as they call them, or claims experience. It's like, why do light bulb. I remember the guy, and I talked to the owner. He said, yeah, and he had the exact same MO, the exact same story, the exact same amount. And that's one I remember is, and you tell them, yeah, this guy can't really tell you exactly what I know, but because you can't share information, at least in certain states, about different workers' comp claims. But there are ways around that, as we know. And so that's one interesting. You see that. You see, again, the fraudulent claims are very interesting. I could go on and on. There was one guy who claimed his 2 meat slicers in his deli were stolen suddenly. And of course, they do a background check, and it turns out he had also claimed stolen jewelry on his homeowner's policy at the same time,
Bingo.
12 times in a row. You get that. And that would be probably those are the most interesting stories at a cocktail party, right? Along with the gory ones when you talk about people's workers' comp injuries.
Yeah, like the meat processing plant, or any, can you give us any gory stories there? Or
I do have one that was interesting when I was just kind of a little young pup, and just basically what we call doing inspections, or basically going into a small business and just, it's simple insurance and just checking a box. They have fire extinguishers and they're doing this and blah, blah, blah. Go in there, and it's in an auto body shop, kind of a crummy looking auto body shop, just cluttered with stuff. Chain smoking owner
with the lobby that has a television that the volume doesn't work, and there's a squiggly line through it, and
the lobby
magazines are about 20 years old on the table.
Time magazine with the Apollo launch on it on the cover, right? Yeah. So you go in, and the lobby also had really great furniture made of old bumpers and engine blocks and things like that. So it wasn't a real pleasant place. Go in, talk to the owner, the chain smoking owner, in an enclosed room, which is always quite pleasant.
It's always nice. And yeah.
Go in the back, say, hey, just want to take a look in the back, right? And a body shop does spray painting, and they do some welding and torch work and things like that. And typically when you're spray painting, you do it in a special spray paint booth that has special exhaust systems and fire suppression, because obviously spray paint can be explosive. I walk in, and one guy is just spray painting a bumper just out in the open, and there's a big cloud of spray paint. And I look over, no more than 15 feet away, a guy had an acetylene torch and was cutting a panel out of a car. That was probably the only time in my career that I actually felt obligated to turn around and just say, thank you, I'm out of here. And
I'm out of here.
I kid you.
Did you give him one on the house? You don't want to be doing that. Did you tell him that?
I think I said that. I made the phone call immediately to the underwriter to say, I hope you have some money set aside for this one. And I kid you not, 2 weeks later in local newspaper, the place burned down. The place, which was a feel good for me because I had done my report and sent it in, and there you go. So lots of funny, silly, crazy things. It's satisfying to actually help people too.
It is. You're a big help, because when you hear these stories on the news, right, you go, how stupid are these people that see these things, like there's all these accidents. Like, well, why didn't they do this? And the reason is they didn't talk to Brian. That's the reason why. That's right.
You realize, you realize in this job that I do, you realize, when you immerse yourself in any job, right? Whether you're a doctor or an attorney or an accountant or whatever the case may be, when you have that initial conversation with someone who's outside of your fraternity, shall we say, you part of you is like, you don't realize right away that they don't understand necessarily what you're talking about. Whereas when you talk to your peers, you throw around technical jargon and industry wording and things like that, and people understand it. Well, my point being in that is that you talk about, well, how could they have been so stupid to do this? How could they have been so stupid to do that? Sometimes it's just ignorance, because
it's ignorance.
You're trying to run a business, right? Yeah. And your first and foremost focus is not on the fact that your fire sprinkler system was inadequate for the storage hazards that you overloaded into your building. It's, I got to get enough inventory and get it out the door to pay my, business mortgage and loans. And that's satisfying when you can convince a person that, hey,
some
it's
folks
in your
have
financial
more
interest.
Some folks have more foresight than others. It's just the way the world works.
That's true. That's keeps me employed.
Keeps you employed. So, all right. So that's good stuff. So remember, if you have a business, call up Brian. He can, at least if he can't help you, he can point you in the right direction.
Brian Murphy, thanks so much for your stories here on Rock Bottom. We learned a ton. Once again, you can follow or connect with the most interesting Brian Murphy on LinkedIn. Hey, thanks for listening, and check out my website at william-mcpherson.com. Building your health and happiness from the
Ground On.